Welcome into episode 7 of the HawgBeat Half Hour presented by Bet Saracen. I'm Kyle Sutherland alongside Daniel Fair. Daniel, it has been not an interesting week by any means, starting with some crazy comments by one athletic director, Hunter Yurachek, on Monday at the Little Rock Touchdown Club. Of course, we came on here and we're going to talk a lot about we're going to more so recap the Ole Miss Arkansas game with a little bit of a preview of Memphis, but we'll just kind of go ahead and open it up right there because I know that's been the talk of the town with the touchdown club. And obviously we're still talking about it on our boards as we record here on a Monday evening. We're still talking about that on our boards. I think everybody's just kind of baffled right now. And look, I've heard some people say, kind of like what we've heard say with Sam Pittman in the past, look, we appreciate the brutal honesty and all these things, but I think this would have been a case where we probably just nothing at all said would have been better. But also at the same time, I think that I would have rather been lied to in this scenario. Basically, I shouldn't say exact words, but paraphrasing, talked about being able to compete for a national championship in baseball, talked about being able to compete for a national championship in men's basketball and all the other sports like Olympic sports that Arkansas has won national championships in. But to straight up admit that you're not ready to compete after now 4 years of the NIL scene, I don't really know what else to say. That I'm still pretty speechless.
Yeah, I had to go back and I watched the entire thing on Monday when Hunter Yurachek spoke, because I wanted to make sure when I'm writing these stories, right, we pushed a couple out. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't misunderstanding or taking something out of context. And his statements and kind of in full about that specific part was, we're prepared to compete in men's basketball and in baseball and all these other sports. We're not prepared to compete for a national championship in football. And then he qualified that with, but we are prepared to compete in the SEC. And that doesn't make that statement just kind of hit me the wrong way. I don't necessarily agree with it. And the reason is because the SEC is the premier conference in college football. The Big Ten can say what they want, but the SEC is the SEC. If you are prepared to compete in the SEC, how are you not prepared to compete for a playoff spot? And if you're prepared to compete for a playoff spot, you're prepared to compete for a national championship, right? Like the statement that you're ready to compete in the SEC basically by proxy means you're prepared to compete for a national championship. And so I'm not gonna lie, I was shocked when I saw, I just saw the first clip on Twitter, and then I went back to YouTube and found the whole thing. But I was shocked that the sitting athletic director of an SEC program, it doesn't matter how good or how bad you've been in the past 5-10 years or whatever, the fact that he would say we're not ready to compete for a national championship, it just floored me. And it's one of those things, like, I guess, yeah, like we can praise him for his honesty, but there are just some things that you shouldn't say as the athletic director of an SEC program. And that is one of those, because at this point, like, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The cat is out of the bag. Arkansas is going to, unless something drastic happens in the next 4 months, Arkansas is going to have to work extra hard to prove that Hunter Yurachek was, misheard or something like that. I don't think he was, but because you're going to get into every other SEC program that you are recruiting against kids for is going to walk into a recruit's room and they're going to throw that clip up on the big screen and they're going to say, Arkansas is not serious about winning a national championship. We are. Like, the first thing that came to mind was J.J. Bush, 4-star linebacker out of Theodore, Alabama. He's been committed to Arkansas for the past couple of months, took a visit to LSU last weekend. Do you think Brian Kelly is not going to walk into there and say, hey, just so you know, this team that you're committed to, they're not ready to compete for a national championship. Why don't you come over to LSU and I can show you the trophies in the past 10 years that we have to prove that we are. Like, you've already put yourself at a massive disadvantage by saying that, at least on the recruiting front. But also, it's just like, I don't even know, how do you come back from that, right? Like, it's going to take something extremely drastic for Hunter Yurachek to prove that, they are ready to compete for a national championship. but I don't know. Maybe the way that I look at it is like, I don't know how you come back from that.
I'm with you. I don't know how you do, because like you said, that was exactly what I was thinking about when I was reading the piece that we put out on Monday. When it was initially, of course, we put one out Tuesday morning and then Monday afternoon. That Monday one, that's exactly what came to my mind, is like, there's no coming back from this. Everybody's talking about it now. You knew that it was going to do all kinds of numbers on social media. That was going to be everything on it. Not just yesterday. It's not like it was going to be forgotten. And that's the thing too, Daniel, is if Arkansas doesn't get, you would hope that they would. Look, Ryan Silverfield's a great coach, built a great program there. So this is not, and I mean, there's no, as we've said before, there is no such thing as gimme wins, especially with what we've seen. And I know that, the Chad Morris days are the Chad Morris days, and things have been a little bit, or quite a bit better since then. Let's give Pittman, his due. He's done as far as winning the bowl games, regardless of the scenario there. But my whole deal with this whole situation is, yes, you cannot put it back in the toothpaste tube. But then you think about, you've already lost Bryce Gilmore. You're talking about recruiting. Bryce Gilmore, to what we would assume would be an NIL deal, going with the way that Texas Tech, not just in football, but softball, all kinds of other sports, getting that oil money. And then on top of that, JJ Bush that was your highest rated recruit. And I believe, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think JJ Bush is your next highest, at least one of the top three. And he's been trending tall. He didn't post anything that I recall on Mississippi State visit, but he did for LSU. And LSU had a big win. I know Florida's down right now, but they had a really big win. And one of the things that was reported by one of our national analysts was that he is really, like, based on, not necessarily is that going to be the final say, but how Arkansas performs. He plans on coming on September 27th when Arkansas plays Notre Dame, and how that he performs when he is going to be in attendance, and how the Razorbacks fare against the Irish. That's going to be a big part of it as well. And so that's the first thing that you think about, is what are recruits going to think about this? Because it used to be one of those things to where, before NIL days and we were just still doing things under the table, that was something that they used. Oh, well, this team's not very good. They've struggled for X amount of years. They could use that. Now, obviously, you've got the money leverage part of it. So there's so many things that are wrong with this, but especially with when you've struggled at recruiting, you've been 12th, 13th, around that same range throughout recruiting over the past few years. That's where you finished as far as the rankings go. That's the very first thing that comes to mind to me, is just that's going to set them back even further in that regard.
Yeah, I just had it pulled up over here. JJ Bush is the highest rated recruit in the class after Bryce Gilmore decommitted. He's also the only national, like in the Rivals 300. He's the 195th player in the nation. He's the only one that's on that Rivals 300 in that class.
And he jumped up from like 238 to 195. So he just made a big jump in the latest rankings that they redid.
Yep. And so we'll see. I guess we'll just have to see what happens on that. But, it's not a soundbite that you want. You don't want to give other coaches fuel. And Hunter Yurachek, unfortunately, gave every SEC program that wants any part of the roster that you, or the class that you have, some kind of ammo to try to sway a recruit. But just going back to Yurachek's comments, Jackson Collier, our basketball analyst, made this tweet on yesterday as it was kind of coming out, and he posted a bunch of questions. He's like, here are some of the questions that I have after watching this. He said, one of them was, how long has this been an issue? How did it get to being an issue? But I mean, one of the other things that I kind of thought of when I was reading that or listening to that was, do you remember over the off season, there was another podcast that dropped some news, and they were like, I have been told by some people in the administration that the expectation is like 6-6, 7-5 every year. Do you remember that part?
Yeah, there was a few different podcasts over the summer that whether it be like recruiting stuff, but yeah, I do. I at least have a little bit of a memory of it. So like, I couldn't tell you who it was or all the details, but yes, I do remember something of that regard.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly who it was. I just remember seeing it kind of blow up, and they started getting attacked by everybody from all sides, and they're like, "This is not true. This can't be accurate. This that's not the expectation." And then Hunter Yurachek comes out and says, at least from his vantage point, that kind of is the expectation, right? Maybe he's not going to come out and say specifically 6-6, 7-5 is the standard. But when you come out and you say, we're not competing for a national championship, what you're saying is we're okay with just mediocrity. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch to say, but I really don't feel like it's that much of a difference to say, if we're not competing to be in the national conversation for a championship every year, we're settling for mediocre or maybe just a bit over mediocre. And I don't know. If that's what the expectation is, if that's what we're willing to settle with, what's the freaking point of having an SEC football program? Like, there is not.
If you're just, and that's the thing. If Pittman is going, like, I tend to agree with Pitt. Now, I know that, a lot of times they played against depleted rosters and stuff, but still, nonetheless, Arkansas has obviously had a depleted roster too. But I tend to agree. Yes, Pittman, like, there is something to be said about winning bowl games. Like, that's good and everything. But that's, like, Pittman also follows up with, that's not something that we should strive for in the end all be all. And that's kind of what I feel like we're getting from Yurachek.
Yeah, and if that's like I don't know, I guess from a personal standpoint, right? If we're not trying to be our best, and if we're not trying to strive to be one of the best websites in the On3 network, why are we even doing this? And it's not just a way to look at a football program. It's a way to look at life. If you're not striving to be the best, what are you doing? And to me, I don't see why they can't. It's strictly a money thing, honestly. And I know you can't just buy a roster and expect them to go compete for a national championship. Shout out Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. But that's a big part of it. And so, there's a part of me that wonders if, maybe Sam Pittman is not as bad of a coach as everybody on the internet thinks he is. Maybe he's just hamstrung with the lack of resources, right? Like, a championship culture starts from the top, and it starts at an administrative level. It doesn't just start with a football program. And you can say, like, well, the basketball, all these other sports are great. Well, one of the reasons that they're great is because they don't require as much money to operate. You don't need, like, with a basketball roster, like, you don't need more than $10 million. Really, 10 million, I don't know what the numbers are now because these numbers just keep going up, but $10 to $15 million to buy you a championship level basketball roster. I don't know what the exact numbers are in baseball, but they're not the same as they are in football. So really what he's saying to me is, it's not so much like, look at all these other sports that are doing great. It's, we don't have enough money. That's really what it comes down to. And who's to blame for that? Is there somebody in the program that is solely in charge of raising money for NIL, for managing a collective, whatever the collective looks like nowadays, because how settlement changes and all that stuff. But if there's somebody responsible for that, like, that's the person that should be receiving the blunt of the criticism. And the fact of the matter is, their collective, and I don't know, do they have an executive director yet? They've been without one for the last 9 to 10 months, as long as I can think of. And so, to me, it looks like the collective is in disarray, which means overall your NIL program is in disarray. And unfortunately, that's what you have to run with the horses in the SEC. That's what you have to be driving over 55 miles an hour on Interstate 40.
Yep, I loved how you threw that in there. Perfect. Yeah, no, this conversation is going to go, especially, like I said, if Arkansas, if Arkansas loses to Memphis, then things are going to probably get possibly really bad. I think, we've been talking about this. I won't go into too much detail because we've been kind of, and obviously not reporting anything, but just we've all kind of been talking around just like everybody has. And, we kind of feel like we know what Coach Pittman's status is, regardless of what happens. But nonetheless, especially if Arkansas doesn't win some ball games, then that's going to be the first thing that people go back to. Not about how the defense performed, not how the offense performed or anything like that. That clip is going to continuously be pulled. Now, if they go out and they beat Memphis, which you expect them to do, they upset Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame is 0-2, but they've obviously played a tough schedule, and I still think Notre Dame is a very good football team, obviously. But if they go out there, that'll give Yurachek a little bit. That'll be the best thing that could happen to him, and for many reasons. So But we'll go ahead and we'll have plenty of conversation like that on the Trough message board. Make sure you subscribe. You can still subscribe for $1. I haven't had the ticker rolling, but you can still go to HawgBeat.com, subscribe for $1 for your first week, and then it goes to the annual after that. But the annual all in all, that's you basically get about 9 months, or you get 12 months for about a 9-month cost. I don't know the exact math, but nonetheless, you get a few for free. So it's a really good deal there. On top of that, not only do you get access to all of On3's content, but Rivals as well, and The Athletic for a year. So before we do get into some of the recap for the Ole Miss game, I want to tell you about our friends at Rhoback. Rhoback has released so many items within their licensed game day collection. From everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. Rhoback has been proudly leading the NIL charge. Maybe some others should take notice, having signed partnerships with multiple college stars past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use code HAW20 on HawgBeat.com for 20% off of all first orders. That's RHOBACK.com for 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code HAW20. All right, so the Ole Miss game. It's been talked about quite a bit, and rightfully so. What were some of the things that went wrong? And I wrote about it on HawgBeat.com. The main point is Coach Pittman definitely still expressed confidence in his freshman kicker, Scott Starzik. And Daniel, the more I dug into this, I actually like the fact that he did send Scott Starzik out for both of those, because I like the fact that he talked about they were trying to get on the scoreboard first. They had a feeling with there being 2 top 5 offenses going at each other, and also with how this game has gone within recent memory, particularly the last decade and all the crazy finishes. I did my top five that I think many would probably have those same ones, maybe just some in different order. But a lot of those games, the majority were in the last, 10 years. I think 3 out of the 5 were in the last 10 years. So you had a feeling that this one had a chance to be pretty wacky, but they wanted to take the points when they sent him out there first, missed that one. And then later on in the game, Pittman admitted that he thought about digging into his bag of tricks because they had a fake, but all in all, he decided to take the points. And I mean, that was for the most part a fairly safe route to try to cut it back to a 7-point game. But I think you look at this right here. So after Starzik missed the field goal on the opening kickoff, or there on the opening drive, you trade touchdowns for 4 consecutive drives. And then really the biggest thing was Ole Miss getting this field goal here right before halftime, because both defenses did really well coming out for the third quarter. Arkansas, of course, had that 3 and out, and then eventually Ole Miss forced a punt and got a touchdown out of it, and then the missed field goal happened that I just referenced. So there's all kinds of things you could point to. I know the offense is as great as they did. They only scored 7 points. Of course, Starzik had the 2 missed field goals. I think he's going to bounce back. I agree with Pittman. The offense, they were the story of the game, but did only score 7 points in the second half and had that crucial fumble as they were driving to take the lead. But really, the glaring deficiency was the defense. And I know that we're going to talk about missed tackles and all those different things, but I can't remember who it was. And something that I thought about this morning was there was somebody had talked about the lack of pass rush, and you can't sit here and expect defensive backs to guard for 5+ seconds. There's so many different things that you could point to, and I think probably anybody that watched this game in its entirety knows that. But I think probably the biggest concern that I have is we're still talking about basic defensive mistakes 3 games in.
Yeah, defensive miscues, miscommunications, missed checks. It just plagued them. And they tightened up a bit in the second half. Both defenses did. Obviously, they made some adjustments. Pittman talked about how they just stopped trying to check off of stuff because the communication just wasn't there. It was very polarizing. I don't know, between the first and the second half. It was like it was just boom, 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 touchdown, 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 and then Ole Miss got that last second field goal, and then you come out of the half and it was like we finally forced a punt, but we had to punt it back, and then they scored a touchdown. Once they went up 10, it just kind of felt like the game was over. Obviously, it wasn't. Like, shout out to the offense for making things interesting at the end. Obviously, I had that Jaylen Brown fumble, but the first half defensive problems were just too much to overcome. I will push back and disagree with you on the very first drive with Starzik's missed field goal. I do agree the second one. I don't have any qualms with him going out there and trying to cut it to a one-score game at that juncture. But in the very first drive, those plays are all scripted, right? Like they all know what they're gonna run. That's not just an Arkansas and a Bobby Petrino thing. That's college football wide. You script the first drive. And I just refuse to believe that they didn't have a 4th and short, like, play call scripted. Like, hey, if it gets to 4th and short at this point, like this is what we want to run. And, at that point, you knew you were going to need a lot of offense. I understand why he sent the field goal unit out there. But Starzik hadn't attempted a field goal since the first game of the season. And he's a true freshman. He's like 18 years old going into a sold-out Wild Vaught Hemingway Stadium for a 50. What was the? I don't have the length in front of me. It was over
51, and then the second was 49. I might have that backwards, but
exactly 51-yard field goal. Like if you got Cam Little, absolutely send Cam Little out there. Like his Cam Little as a in his last year, send him out there. But I don't know that I necessarily agree with him sending out Scott Starzik, who is just barely past 18 years old, for his second field goal attempt of his college career at a sold out night game in a hostile environment. And he shanked it. He missed it. And I think I would have liked to have seen them continue to be aggressive and go for it. Obviously, the more aggressive team won, right? Like if it was 4th and short, Ole Miss was going for it. And that to me it felt like, I guess yes, take the points, but to me it felt like we're playing scared. We're playing safe.
I could see that. No, that's a good point. Because like you said, it's different if you have an experienced kicker. I think some of maybe what was in the back of Pittman's mind too was, and like you said, Alabama A&M environment. No disrespect to Alabama A&M, but you're at home. It's the first game. Obviously, Ole Miss is a much better, as a top 20 team, is a much better opponent, and the biggest thing was the hostile environment. Maybe part of that was Pittman knew that he could hit it, and he wanted him, like he knew that he had that kind of range, and he wanted to see if he could instill some confidence. Maybe that was some of it, but that is a good point. I mean, you had 4th and 2, your offense was humming right along. So, and look, and I have said, to be fair, I've said, I don't know, maybe on here, but I have said multiple times publicly that if you're across the 50 and your offense is showing that they can move the football, especially if it's not like taking a massive risk, it's at the very beginning of the game, first drive, then I can certainly understand going for it. So no, I think you make a great point. And I think too, it's more of, and maybe that was part of it. I do think, like you said, on the second one, that was definitely more so playing it safe. And I was fine with that because the defense, like we talked about, they did play better, especially, once Walker had gone down, which thank God he's okay. That was unbelievably scary. We're not sure that Pittman talked about long-term, not really sure how long he's going to be out, but he is okay. Everything is good to go as far as his recovery. But once that happened, and it's I hate that it was something like that got him amped up, but nonetheless it did. They played a lot better, but like you said, ultimately just some of the mistakes from the in the first half really ended up haunting them, and that's the biggest concern. I think going back to what I was saying is, we heard throughout fall camp, whether it be the scrimmage or even, against Alabama A&M on that first drive, just getting off to slow starts. And that's something that really scared, Pittman talking about using the sidelines. He said that should be your friend, I think 3 or 4 times in his press conference on Monday. Like, that's something to me that you should have known already. Like, that's the kind of, and we're talking about, like, especially in the first game, that it was schematics type stuff that they had. I don't know. I think that I'm just a little bit, the only thing that I think about, the only thing that I am for sure sold on right now defensively is Quincy Rhodes when he's healthy. He played 37 snaps, graded out at 86. They're kind of nursing that groin to see what happens there. But I think that's probably about, but then again, to be fair with the secondary too, if they get a good pass rush, Julian Neal played a great game. He had a few drops, or a couple of drops in the Arkansas State game, but I think he's a pretty solid player. But this secondary, if you get a good pass rush, I think you're good. But I'm still worried, and I think many probably share this sentiment, that there is a lot of concerns defensively.
Yeah, I think one of the things that negated the pass rush is Ole Miss didn't really run a whole lot of like long developing plays. It was a lot of kind of quick strike stuff, and you maybe not, they didn't have these super long plays to allow the defense to get in there and get pressure on those plays. I mean, there were several that Arkansas did just barely miss. They still hurried up Trinidad to Chambliss, but the secondary needs to play significantly better than they did in that first half. I'll agree. I think Julian Neal is going to be is one of those good ones. And I posted a thread on our message board submitting questions for the HawgBeat half hour. And one of them asked, is Julian Neal really him? He doesn't seem to get targeted much. I think he is. I think he is severely not talked about enough. I think he's one of those really good pieces. Obviously, he's not perfect, but he's made several really good plays. I've been really impressed with him. Him and Quincy Rhodes both. Quincy's really good. I don't really know how else to say it. Like he's kind of got that perfect blend of like talent and athleticism that makes him just really scary for opposing defense or for opposing offenses. But they've just got to tighten up. The chunk plays were just huge. It seemed like every other play, like Ole Miss was getting 20 yards, 25 yards down the field, and it was all just basic stuff. Or there was a wide receiver like wide open with nobody within 10 yards of him. And so they've got a lot of stuff that they got to tighten up. I do think they've got good pieces. I would like to see those pieces play better and play more cohesive.
Trying to unmute myself here. I got ahead of myself and went to Memphis. I was going to do that, discuss that real quick before we get to our tailgate forecast with Zach Hall, but certainly got to give more credit to Taylon Green. Over 300 yards and 115 on the ground. The first player in Razorback history to do it, first ever player. You think about that's crazy to think. I know Matt Jones wasn't the greatest passer in the world, but to think that he did not accomplish that feat, that would be the first one that would come to mind for me. So that's incredibly, Ryan Mallett was an incredible passer, not the greatest on his feet. Tyler Wilson moved around in the pocket a little bit more, but threw for 300 plus multiple times. I mean, you've had some great quarterbacks. You think back to the Joe Ferguson days, who had a gun for an arm. Ron Calcagney, that was a pocket. Of course, that was pocket passers back in those times. But Quinn Grovey's another one that I'm a little shocked that never did it. But that is hard to do. And Taylon he's really gained a lot of national traction. So that has picked up for him. So another great game from him. Obviously, Omega Blake has been what we thought he could be. What was it? Amari Blake, I think that Roman Harper called him on SEC Nation. I think that he probably knows should know by now his real name. But let's take a look at Memphis real quick. So right now, I know that I can't remember I know off the top of my head that they have the number 2 defense in the American Athletic Conference, which is kind of funny because Arkansas has the number 2 offense in the SEC. But look, this Memphis team, they've done exactly what they're supposed to do. Look, they're 3-0 through 3 games. They've beaten 3 teams that, I think probably Troy would be the best, just off the top of my head, would probably be the best one out of all 3 of those teams. They're going to come out in what Pittman described as some exotic looks, some 3-3-5s on defense. Offensively, they're going to run. It doesn't shock you that an offensive line, a former offensive line coach in Ryan Silverfield likes to run the football like a former offensive line coach in Sam Pittman. So you're going to see some of the RPOs there. But that is pretty interesting here that you've got 2 former offensive line coaches that got their first I think this is Silverfield's first head coaching job, if I'm not mistaken. But he became the interim for the final game in 2019 when Norvell left for Florida State. So this is his 6th full year, like Pittman took over in the COVID 2020 season. So a lot of similarities in that regard. But also, too, Daniel, is we've got 2 quarterbacks, or we've got quarterback Taylon Green that played at Memphis, which actually has played more games at Liberty. What is it? Simmons Liberty Stadium. I know it's the Liberty Bowl. But Liberty Stadium has played in more games than Memphis's quarterback. He's played in 2, of course, played at Boise State, and then had that great performance in the Liberty Bowl last year. So, and then Omega Blake had one of his better games for Charlotte. Lost that football game, but had one of his better games last year for Charlotte. Had over 100 yards just on 3 receptions and a 39-yard touchdown. So, few of the Razorback players playing a very familiar team.
Yeah, it's there's storylines aplenty for this one. Obviously, you mentioned Silverfield and Pittman, both O-line coaches, in their first head coaching gigs. Sam Pittman holds a bowl record, or holds the bowl record over him. Silverfield's 4-1. Sam Pittman hasn't lost a bowl game. I think he's played in 3, or coached in 3, and obviously that 2021 that TCU wussed out of. I don't know if you count that a win or not. They didn't play a game, but 2020 COVID was such a weird time that it's neither here nor there. But Ryan Silverfield wins in the head coaching overall record. He's 45-21 as a college head coach, and he's accustomed to winning. Memphis is accustomed to winning football games, so we'll see what happens with Memphis and Arkansas this weekend. But pretty big game. I don't know. I would consider this one a must win. Either must win or can't lose. They're pretty much the same thing, but I would consider this one a must win for Sam Pittman and for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, you absolutely have to get this one, especially with what's coming up after that, and Notre Dame, and then the rest of that SEC slate. You got to go to LSU, and that's what the big kicker is. Not only do you go to LSU and to Texas, but I know Texas hasn't been that great this year. But later in the year, what are they going to look like? LSU has looked really. I know LSU didn't look great offensively. DJ Lagway helped them out with 5 interceptions, which is insane to me. But it's a tough schedule ahead. So there will no more free, which, as I said earlier, there is no such thing as freebies when you're an Arkansas Razorback, as we have seen. But that will get it for this segment. We will hop on here next with Zach Hall for the tailgate forecast. Hopefully the weather, I haven't checked the extended weather. At least I guess really up through Friday I'm caught up. So we'll let him catch us up to date on that. Hopefully we're getting a little bit more of a relief from what we have been getting. But nonetheless, just make sure you stick to HawgBeat.com. We've got all kinds of conversation going on the boards. Obviously we've got content flowing, and we'll have complete coverage of the Memphis game as always. So up next, we've got Zach Hall with the tailgate forecast. We now welcome in Arkansas Storm Tracker Zach Hall for the tailgate forecast. And Zach, it was hot in many ways in Oxford. As you said, the temperature last week, and then the offenses, especially in the first half, as Daniel and I just talked about on the previous segment, after Arkansas missed that first field goal, and then after that, there was 4 straight possessions that Ole Miss and Arkansas traded touchdowns. So definitely a shootout like we expected could have happened, particularly in that first half. And then defenses played a little bit better, quite a bit better from what they were doing, at least in the first half once we got into the second. But as we said, it was a hot day temperature-wise. We expected that. Now that we've got an 11 o'clock kickoff, basically a late breakfast, early lunch kickoff, as we used to call them, breakfast with Bielema, I remember back in those days. What is the forecast looking like across the river in Memphis this week for kickoff?
Well, honestly, we're a little bit early in the forecast period. And, we're filming this on Tuesday. The game's on Saturday. I do think that at this time, I cannot rule out the potential for some rain and storms the first half of the day on Saturday. Hopefully things get a little bit better in that department and it's a little bit more dry. But as far as temperatures go, I think it's a safe bet, upper 70s to low 80s. That's 79 to 81 degree range around kickoff. We'll likely warm up a little bit as the game goes on. Obviously, cloud cover, if we do have rain and storms, could prohibit us from warming up too much, but it does look a little warm and sticky at kickoff at 11 in Memphis. So if you're heading to the game, definitely recommend going ahead and packing some rain gear just in case. It's definitely not going to feel much like cool weather. It'll be warm and probably a little bit sticky regardless of what happens.
Most definitely. So make sure bring your rain gear with you just in case. I think actually the last time, so the first ever game that I went to, Razorback game that I ever went to was in Memphis in the mid 90s, I guess it was. And I think I remember rain being, I don't know how I remember this from 30 years ago. Definitely make sure you bring your ponchos just to make sure you're good to go. Maybe your small umbrellas. So that way you're all covered there. Well, how do the Razorbacks fare this week? Anything? You think they bounce back? Obviously, the forefront has not necessarily, ever since Monday, the forefront has kind of been more so about what athletic director Hunter Yurachek said. I think that's kind of taken some attention off of the loss. But do you think that the Razorbacks bounce back? Obviously, this is it goes without saying it's a must win just because this is that you absolutely have to beat.
Yeah. Since I started hopping on with you guys, I'm 2-0 on my picks. I picked Ole Miss last week, unfortunately, and they ended up winning. I do think Arkansas wins this game. Arkansas has, I think, one of the better offenses in the country. I'm really concerned about that defense. We did make some adjustments in the second half, made me feel a little bit better about it, but I don't think Memphis has the horses to keep up in this one. I would say Arkansas 42, Memphis 21, maybe 28. Memphis will score some points, I'm sure. I would be shocked if we just go in there and thump them, but I do think we'll win by at least a couple of touchdowns. Especially in that second half, probably start wearing on him a little bit. Taylon Green has really impressed me. He's just tough to cover.
Yeah.
He is slinging the ball and his scramble ability, and then Omega Blake. And I mean, a lot of the receivers, I feel like, and then Mike Washington and Braylon played pretty well too. So offensive line looks much improved. I'm really impressed with the offense. The defense, though, unfortunately, I think has some work to do, but I think Hogs win this one.
Yeah, offensive line has been look, I knew that Taylon, especially if he was healthy, he was going to improve. Now, I didn't expect him to be at the level that he has been playing. And that's one of the other things that Daniel and I were talking about. It's kind of crazy that he's like, look, 300 passing and 100 rushing. That is obvious. I mean, it's the first time that it was ever done in school history. Yeah. But I think that I was a little bit surprised that Matt Jones didn't have one of those, especially like the 7 overtime one, because he played in 2 7 overtime games. Yeah. So he wasn't the greatest passer in the world, but obviously electric with his legs. Also, Quinn Grovey was a little. I know Quinn and they ran a good bit back in those days, so it wasn't quite the air raid attacks that we have now. But those would probably be the two that I would point at as far as, you wouldn't expect Ryan Mallett to rush for 100 yards. You wouldn't expect Tyler Wilson to run. You think about all the great quarterbacks, Joe Ferguson back in the day, and those guys. But yeah, Taylon's played another level. But that's something that Sam Pittman pointed out the other day was the offensive line with how phenomenal they've been. I don't know if phenomenal is the word, but they have looked really, really good.
I'm sure most would probably agree, but I think we have an offense that can play with anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll score. I think we could score on anybody. It's just you have to have that other half. And I think if we had, just even a slightly better defense, and I'm not dogging on them, they're doing what they can. I get it, but I think we beat Ole Miss by a couple of touchdowns, and they're a solid team. So I don't know. Always a Hog fan, but Saturday was frustrating, I'm sure, like many of us. Yeah. But we'll see what happens Saturday. Hopefully we can bounce back and get a W.
So back to 70s and low 80s is what we're probably. I know it's a little bit early, but back to 70s.
Kickoff.
Kickoff.
I think kickoff will be upper 70s. Some of the data has it at 79. Some it has it at 81. And usually I decide kind of in the middle. I would say around 80 degrees at kickoff. Obviously rain and storms. If we do have rain and storms Saturday, that could have impacts on the temperature significantly, especially cloud cover that lingers or maybe some rainfall that lingers. If we have storms that pass through early, it leaves that pool of cool air compared to just baking in the sun all morning. So I definitely think that there could be some rain and stuff, but we'll see what happens. We still have a few days. Sometimes the models get a little wonky on that a few days out. So I'll have updates.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, definitely go check Zach. It's Zachary Hall Storm Tracker on Facebook, right? I always link it in our episode. Okay, so yeah, that's the best.
It's Zachary Hall Arkansas Storm Tracker on Facebook. My Twitter is just Zachary Hall. Yeah. YouTube is Zachary Hall Arkansas Storm Tracker. TikTok. If you type in Arkansas Storm Tracker, I would be very upset if it didn't come up because I do all the stuff. So if you type that in or just Zachary Hall, it should come up. Hopefully.
Yeah. So this will be kind of like a little bit of a primer for everybody to know what to prepare for, and then you can check him out daily to see what it's looking like by the time we get to Friday and Saturday. So, well, Zach, always a pleasure, man. We'll see if you go 3-0 this week and remain undefeated. I know that, this last one, all of us pick, you, myself, Daniel, all included, we all had Ole Miss. So we were unfortunately correct on that. But hopefully this week, everybody's right. We'd love to see the Razorbacks get back on track. So, all right. Well, that was it for the Tailgate forecast. And also for episode 7 of the Hog Beat Half Hour presented by Bet Saracen. We will catch you next week.